to start. I'll just start the recording now. So, hello everyone. Thanks for joining in for the India Cloud Security Summit. So, we have a great set of speakers today. We have Joel, Ryan, and Galen who are going to speak about the Microsoft 365 virtual marathon, which was a great event. So, I am pretty much excited to have everyone here. So, thanks first of all, thanks for joining in. And I without much further wait, the stage is all yours. So.
Excellent. Um, I think before I even start the slides, I do want to just have everybody introduce themselves. Today's presentation, we're going to be talking about virtual marathon. And since this is a security session, we totally want to talk about Teams bombing and that aspect of what can happen, bad things that can happen during a meeting and how to get around those things and how to deal with them. Um, and we want to share some lessons learned. But before we do that, let's do some intros. And let's go ahead and have, I'm going to stop sharing so you can see our videos more clearly. Let's have, why don't you kick it off, Galen?
Sure. Welcome, everybody. Thanks for having us. My name is Galen Keene. I'm a managing partner of Butterfly Technologies, a consulting firm based out of Southern California. And we specialize in Microsoft 365 and Azure-based technologies. I'm also the president of the San Diego Office 365 Productivity Group and work with Ryan and Joel and other community organizers throughout the state of California to kind of bring together the California user groups. So we call ourselves the Microsoft 365 California User Group. So trying to remain very actively engaged in the community, working with the gentleman you see here at the for the M365 Virtual Marathon. That's it for me.
Go for it, Ryan.
Sweet. My name is Ryan Schouten. I work for Zilio. We're a document migration company. So we specialize in moving files and it's all the associated metadata from one legacy system to another system. Say for example, FileNet or Drupal or all these different things, MediaWiki to SharePoint or any variation of the above. So I've been there for a little bit. We're working with these guys for a while doing the marathon. Microsoft MVP, happy to be here.
Thanks, Ryan. And hopefully we don't have any audio issues or video issues. But it's great to be here in India today, virtually. I work at Patron. I also work with Joel 365. I'm kind of a fractional employee where I work with a number of different companies. In fact, I've been working with Valo recently on some of their partner strategy as well. But it's great to be here and connect with you guys. I'm a Microsoft MVP and a regional director, and yeah, I, I'm that went on with the Microsoft 365 Virtual Marathon. You could say that this kind of started with the moving from the physical to the virtual. This actually started with an event similar to this, but it quickly turned into let's go global and let's invite everyone. And this last year, the first year we did it, I think we got somewhere around 12, 13,000 attendees, registered attendees. And then we had this past year, we actually had something that happened, and we're going to build up to that experience. But we want to start by kind of giving you some background and sharing more about our experience and understanding more about the platform and what's possible. So let me just dive into these slides a little bit, and then we can get back to story time, and we definitely want to open it up for questions. So when we say Microsoft 365 Virtual Marathon, this year, 2021, was our second year. and yeah, over 10,000 registered attendees both years. And we basically, Ryan, Galen, and I pulled this whole story together. In fact, let me play with this a little bit. Being able to really tell this story about how do we bring the community together in a virtual way, and being able to talk more about empowering the community and connecting the community at a time when I felt like it was that much more important. And both Galen and Ryan, and Jeff, who you see pictured there as well, and from India, and we had Yana from Europe, and we had kind of country managers from across the globe to help us with languages. We had something like, I would say, on our committee, it was probably 10 to 12 people, but the expanded volunteers was over 100 people when you talk about all the moderators and people who are helping us run the event. A lot of support. I don't know if you guys want to add in on what that event was and what it meant to you.
Sure, I can go ahead. I'll start with it. So for me, it was a good opportunity to be able to connect the community globally. So it's one of those things that there have been a lot of local, regional type events, but this is one of the first and the biggest that was more of a global audience. So we had the mass scale of the amount of content, the number of attendees, the number of speakers, and so I know Joel has talked about our volunteers, but we also had each year, for as far as our speakers concerned, they're also volunteers, and we had the first year we had 400 plus. This year's we had, I think, around 300 speakers. So a lot of good content, a lot of good people, and these are top-notch speakers. Plus, we also had some people that was their first opportunity speaking at a community event. So it was one of those things that was an awesome channel for people to be able to get involved and to be able to have access to some really great content.
Yeah, just to add a little bit there, I think one of the most important parts of working in with technology is learning technology, right? You're always learning. Nobody knows everything, and for many of us that are in areas where there's local user groups or access to MVPs or RDs, you have an accelerated through your network. You have an accelerated like on ramp into modalities to learn more. And this event kind of brings everybody together and provides a pipeline to engage and learn. And the idea here behind it is to empower those without a local user group, those that might be separated by distance, and certainly with due to the pandemic at home. Bring them together so that we can all learn from each other, make connections, lasting connections that we can leverage after the conference. And so I think it's been very successful in that.
Thanks, Galen. Yeah, I mean, before this event, there was a handful of kind of regional events, but this was really the first global one, and we were really trying to go for scale. It was right before this that Microsoft talked about being able to do basically setting up support so that we could do 10 simultaneous or rooms. And you could say that the first time we did this, we really pushed it. And in some ways, I think we broke it in a good way, where they were able to help us scale and to be able to push it. And we successfully were able to do, I forget what the widest was. Wasn't it somewhere around 15? Or did we
I think
go
our
to?
widest was 16 at one point.
Yeah. Yeah. So when we say widest, we actually had 16 simultaneous sessions going on And during that time, we were running it through live events. I'm super excited about the fact that events like this can bring awareness to good purposes and good needs. Um, this event is actually bringing awareness to the Youth Ubel Foundation. I hope I'm saying that right. And there's encouragement to contribute. In our event, we actually as well did tried to raise some money and awareness around the pandemic at that time. But this is fantastic. So you could say that Zoom bombing definitely started before Teams bombing. And I just wanted to give you kind of a clear definition of what is Zoom bombing. Zoom bombing is Zoom users across the world who are affected by hackers or pranksters infiltrating calls, displaying sometimes adult content or hateful imagery to attendees. And in fact, in the US, they've defined Zoom bombing as a federal offense, and Zoom was forced to make changes. You may remember early on in the pandemic when it was very easy for people to kind of guess or kind of jump through various meetings, and people could kind of figure out what a meeting was, and people who weren't invited would show up and do horrible things. And you could say that when you're running an event, the same kind of thing could happen to you. And in fact, the story will tell you a little bit later on. This definition of hackers or pranksters infiltrating meetings, um, it absolutely does and can happen. So you'll hear more about that. I like this little quote: "Success is stumbling from failure to failure with no loss of enthusiasm." When I think about running a global scale event with thousands of attendees, um, this idea of you run into a problem, but your ability to respond to that and your ability to very quickly take that failure and you know you're trying to quickly respond to those things without freaking out, without you got to keep your cool. It's amazing running an event, especially live events like this, where it's virtual with tons of people who are on. It can be intimidating. It can be quite difficult, but your ability to respond to those things and again, kind of understand what's going on, respond to it, address those issues. That's a key thing there. So what does disruption look like? Well, if people are coming off mute and saying things or showing their screen or sharing their video, they may be posting to the chat and kind of chatting things up. Your ability to mute, your ability to kind of set up roles. Even in this meeting, when we first got in there, I saw that there were a lot more people who were showing as speaker versus as attendee. And I don't know if that was Ryan that was moving, demoting
That was
people.
me.
I figured it might be.
Yeah, it's one of those lessons learned from the marathon is the only way you can really control what people can do is by having that segregation of roles. With this particular meeting, there was none configured in the beginning, so everybody came in as a presenter. So to alleviate that, and then one of the things we didn't have as well is when we did the last marathon, there wasn't even the ability to turn off people's ability to turn on their camera. So luckily, we had attendees non-maliciously had their camera on in the middle of a presentation, and so they're sitting around, moving, doing whatever it is they're doing, and distracting from the presentation that's going on. So sad to say, I end up having to remove normally a good attendee from the meeting just because they didn't respond to the messages to turn their camera off or whatever. They didn't see it. Who knows? But I just had to say, okay, you know what? I just had to remove them because it was getting distracting and causing problems with the presentation that was going on. So yeah, so for this one, whenever I'm in there, if they're not needed to be a presenter, I'll make them attendee, because for the most part, if we need to, we can let you guys come off mute. Then again, as Joel mentioned, to stop disruption, we also, since everybody's an attendee now, it makes it easy to be able to say, hey, we're going to shut off everybody's microphones. Problem solved.
And that's exactly, it's amazing how a lot of the things we asked for initially have slowly. Microsoft Teams, you could say, was probably one of the most important efforts this past year and a half, where a lot of the key features around being able to properly manage a meeting, and really trying to address our ability to get together and have a great online experience, whether it's a small group of people or whether it's thousands of people, and the ability to chat experience or video experience. You really want to be able to have what you want when you want it, and not allow pranksters to be able to take control and do whatever they want. And I do want to kind of break out for a bit of a demo, just kind of talking about the meetings and settings. I'm debating whether we want to do that after we talk about the different types of events, and I think I will. So let me talk about the different types of events, and then we'll break into demo. One of the newest features of Microsoft Teams and events is something called webinars. So I put together this slide to help you understand. There's kind of three different types of events that you can create, and I say events as in meetings, webinars, and live events. So you've got kind of these three different types, and one of the key features of webinars is your ability to have registration, so you can actually see who's going to be attending. You can actually require registration even, and you can control whether people can share their registration, like they may register and then share the meeting with someone else. And you can decide whether they can still attend or whether you're just gathering those who register. And that also includes attendance reports. One of the key gotchas with attendance reports, if you're requiring registration, if that person doesn't register, they won't show up in the attendance report. So that's actually really important, that if you're requiring registration, that you make sure that anybody who's attending does register, and use that as kind of a I once did an event, a webinar, and we sent out we had it as required registration, but then we forwarded the link to everybody who did register in a different way, and those who attended, we didn't have anything in our attendance report because no one actually was on the registration report. So that was actually a key to understand. Other thing, pretty much the meetings it has things like Together Mode, PowerPoint Live, the polls and quizzes, breakout rooms, things like that, call transcription, and so on. Meetings is actually the base platform for all this. Meetings itself has scaled over time. Meetings originally started out being kind of a small people, designed with chat, designed with Together Mode, and a bunch of these kind of key features around being able to do video and chats and callings. But it's scaled to where now you can have 1,000 attendees in a meeting, and your ability to actually have presenters as well as attendees, and being able to control what can attendees do, what can presenters do based on meeting settings, and we'll dive into that. Live events have been kind of a staple for a long time, but live events in the beginning was really quite challenging from an external guest presenter perspective, and that has actually gotten a lot better. used to be very challenging to run a public event, because you'd need to make sure that your presenters first logged into the tenant. And now during COVID, and I don't know if this is going to continue, but basically you could have up to 50 now concurrent live meetings running, where in the beginning this was much more restricted. So that's important to understand as well. And I think this is, think about this from a broadcast perspective. If you have a camera running and you're going to do share that feed to your audience, this can actually be really helpful from a perspective of being able to do broadcasts, town hall type meetings, where you've got an organizer, presenters, moderators. You can have multiple presenters and decide who's showing up, and there's kind of a staging experience to that. Professional cameras, encoders, streaming to stream. And I'm going to let Ryan, I know that he's done a lot with pushing the boundaries on what's possible with live events. If you want to talk more about that.
Sure. So yeah, a lot of the, like when this whole pandemic thing started, a lot of the features that are being used today in this meeting or being used around the world for a bunch of different meetings, the only way to get those features and the quality level for your events or your meetings or whatever, the only option you had was live events. So it's fairly easy to say, hey, if you want a broadcast only, I'm sending my message out to the world type situation, you don't need the level of interaction, you don't need the chat and the two-way communication. Live events, even still, is the preferred way to go. It allows you to be able to scale really well. Also, you can ingest a lot of different media sources, as Joel mentioned, and you can do some really cool stuff with it. Microsoft has seen that, okay, that's there. It does have its challenges where it is not the ideal tool. So they've started taking some of those things and some of the feedback that we've all been providing them and integrating those options into Teams meetings. So, for example, the ability to say, hey, don't let attendees come off mute. Don't let attendees turn off their camera. You can disable chat. There's a bunch of these different things where you can customize a meeting to get you close to a live event, minus you don't have the external producer that can control everything quite so much. So there are ways and places where a live event would still be the preferred option, but there are a lot of those features are starting to get pulled into meetings. You know, when we started the first marathon, one of the things as well is, as Joel mentioned, we had 13,000 people register the first year, and with that, those 13,000 people would not have been able to make it into the meeting if it was a Teams meeting. So like when we had our keynote with Jeff Teeper, we would have only been able to handle the first 250 people and we would have been done, which doesn't work. Since then, as we can see, they have a max of 100,000 users. Cool. For live events, now you can get to those similar numbers in a Teams meeting. Granted, they'll switch people over to a listen-only mode, so it's just as if they were in a live event, but still, the ability to be able to increase the audience and be able to numbers in the meetings has made it so that pretty much it's just, okay, not just okay, I have to take this. It's okay, which one provides the experience I'm looking for the content I want to share.
And I would double down on this idea that the amount of control has increased over time. The amount of your ability to manage a prankster. In the beginning, they could pretty much, with a meeting, they could do anything that anybody else had. It was almost like everybody was like a presenter. Anyone could share their screen, anyone could share their video, and so on. And live events in the beginning was your way of being able to control that. But that also meant no chat for attendees. It also meant that if somebody wanted to come off mute, they couldn't come off mute. So there were a lot of restrictions in the live events where it's designed for really large scale. Now it's a lot easier to be able to have much more control across the board with a lot of these situations where you're not forced into a situation where you have to run a live events if you don't want to run a live event. I want to dive into webinars and live events just from a management perspective. So when we talk about cybersecurity, or you talk about, running an event and aspects of that, I want to just kind of jump into the interface here. And I'm curious to see how this goes with the video. So let me start with Teams. Hopefully it's not, it looks like you can see my face on one side and the demo on the other. Are we good to go? All right.
Yep.
So the first thing you should understand here is that your ability to create a live event or a webinar, just go right into your Teams, and right on the calendar, you'll notice that there's new meeting. So by default, it's a new meeting. You can either meet now or you can click new meeting. At the drop down, you'll see here we can schedule a meeting, we can run a webinar or a live event. So what I'll do is I'm going to have Ryan demo live events. So I'll focus on webinars. So just heads up, Ryan. So if I click webinar, what you'll notice here is I have a number of different options. So I can choose what's the time zone, which can be quite relevant for global events. And you can see it actually is showing here in UTC. That was something that when we were talking about global events, our ability to speak the same language as it relates to time was really quite important. All right, so now our ability to run a registration form and requiring registration, we actually have a few different options I want to walk through here. So first off, it figured out my time zone, UTC -8 Pacific time. But the other thing here is we can request responses and allow forwarding. Now, some of these things are actually as well sorted out through policy. So you may or may not see options, even based on a tenant perspective, if it's not allowing certain choices here. So you actually can enforce and lock down options as it relates to webinars in policies and Teams as well. And I won't have time to get into what all those policies are. But there's a couple of key ones here that you're going to notice in your own tenants. It's very common, as an example, that the for everyone is grayed out. There's a lot of tenants that are configured to where they may not allow anonymous attendance at your meetings. So
and I think that's
for
actually the
everyone,
default, Joel. I think when they rolled out that feature, that was the default, is that the for everyone is not enabled. You can see it, but it's grayed out. You can't select it. So I know I started working with it a few weeks ago with a webinar, and it wasn't there, and I just had to go into the policies and Teams and enable it.
I found that as well.
I guess I was lucky. Mine wasn't grayed out, but in my work tenant, it was. And so we had to go through the hoops of there's a PowerShell line to be able to turn it on. But as well, there's policies for allowing anonymous. So that's that idea of being able to not even just requiring registration, but allowing registration. So if it's just for people in your org, then your ability to get people outside in the outside world to be able to register for it, you really need to be able to allow the for everyone. Now let me show you this form. So in this situation, I am requesting responses. I'm allowing forwarding, so people can actually forward my webinar. Right now, I'm allowing for everyone, but we want to create this registration form. And this was actually a key piece that was missing for meetings or even for live events. My ability to actually have people register for my event. And I've heard of situations where in companies, if this is training, they want to know, they want people to sign up so they know how many people signed up for it. And as an example, if you're running an event, it's very helpful to know how many people are registered, because then in a lot of ways helps you understand energy and how much more help with moderators or help with the rooms you might need based on how many people are registered. This upload an image, it does give you some guidance here of 918 by 120 pixels. It doesn't require that, so it's saying for best. And let me just kind of show you as an example. If I just grab a random picture, let's just say this is a speaker thing. But you can absolutely create your own little, you can create your own image based on those recommendations there. There it is. Oops. Sorry about that. We'll just grab a random photo. And what you can then do with that is you can then, you'll notice the window itself doesn't change. So I can actually focus it on what I want and scale it slightly. I can kind of zoom in. But basically, this might be your banner as an example. It might be, include the speaker's photo, information, and so on. In fact, even what you're putting here in terms of the event details, I like the idea of the banner itself having that kind of information as well. We're running a webinar called Sample, and we can pick and choose our time. You'll notice the time zone is fixed based on my own, so it'll be easy for me to know what time zone it is. I can then as well add a description. And I would say you can actually be quite verbose here in the description. This is pretty much the only major text box you have here. There is this spot to kind of pick speakers. Again, if this is external speakers, you actually can type whatever you want. It's not just a picker. And as well, you can add whatever information you want. Then we've got, this is what the form looks like, first, last, email, but we can actually customize this and add, oh, we want to know what organization you're in. You can decide is it required or not. And same kind of deal here with, we want to know people's country, and we want to know, we can give them a choice or an input field. Let's give them a choice. And let's add a question called, whatever. So we can say, but vanilla and strawberry. You get the idea. And that's it for the form. It's a very simple form. Again, the key things here to understand, basically, we're going to save this. That wasn't very nice. Okay, that's not going to happen when you do it.
Well, Joel, it's just saying that your start time has to be in the future, which right now it's 4 minutes ago.
Okay, I didn't see that error. Okay, we'll make it PM instead of AM. Good call. This copy registration link can be quite helpful. Make sure to invite your presenters. Actually, if your presenters are on the meeting itself, when you actually send it out, they'll get it from Outlook. but it's helpful to make sure you capture the registration link, because what you don't want to do is send them. You want to make sure it's the link that people can actually click on and get to, not the one that's like your admin. And if I click View in Browser, here you can actually see what it actually looks like in the browser, what that registration page looks like. And it's just taking a minute to load. Yeah. 1 minute. Okay. That looks like I'm having a little bit of issues here. It's probably just as well loading on the background. No big deal. All we got to do is refresh it. May have been waiting for the image to upload or waiting for the meeting to be fully created and so on. But this is really important. I would say anyone who's creating a webinar, required, you have to make sure that this link works and ensure that what's happening here is valid for your users, as an example. You know, because in fact, I would say make sure there's somebody on the outside that is actually testing your link as well, because you really want to make sure that this page renders properly and that access actually works. So if this is something for the company, make sure people inside the company can get to it. If it's outside, you want to make sure people on the outside can get to it. And sure enough, here's our form. We have some required fields as well as some kind of optional ones, and then they can click register now. And I'll just fill this out so you guys understand what this is or how it works. And it can actually tell that this is me. So this is the other reason why I want to have someone outside of me do it. So as an example, if we actually send this out to everybody on the call to register, yeah, here we go. And while I'm sending that out, Ryan, if you want to take control.
Can do.
And tell us a little bit about live events.
Sure. Let's see. I will say we'll do a side-by-side mode, and I want that screen. And I want this backup stuff. All right, cool. So as mentioned, that goes over there. Live events is created in the similar way as to a webinar and a regular meeting. It used to be, I told people, Microsoft kind of hid how to create a live event. Now they've realized, hey, we need to make it a little more obvious. So if we come in, create a live event, we can't really demo doing a live event just because it's a live event within a Teams meeting. So Teams does not necessarily like that, but we can at least show you the scheduling piece portion of it and talk about some of the differences. So similar to a webinar, you have a lot of the basic information, the title of what you want your live event to be. You can put in a location. This is really handy for any locations that have like an official auditorium or a building where your attendees are actually going to have in-person people in addition to virtual. As you can see in my tenant, I don't have any buildings configured, so I can type in whatever I want. But it also will give you the option to select an official building that you've registered in Office 365. Standard start times, time zones, all that. One of the things we got as well is you can have your option. There's in a live event, there are technically three, actually four. But as far as actually people writing content, there's three roles. You've got the organizer and the producer, and then there's a presenter, and then the fourth one is attendees, but if we're talking about, so with the organizer, technically the organizer they're the owner of the live event, so they have full control no matter what. There are some things that even still, they are the only ones that can change. So just keep that in mind, that you just don't want somebody you don't want your organizer to be somebody that's going to be on vacation when the actual live event happens. Otherwise, if something goes wrong, you have nobody there to kind of fix it. So, for example, on here, I can go ahead and throw Galen, and I'm going to throw Joel. And so by default, they're going to come in as presenters. I can also make them a producer. Now, as far as the differences between the two, a producer can control what content is being displayed in the live event, whereas the presenter is just like in a meeting now. They can share their screen, they can turn on their camera, but the producer is the one that controls the layout of, hey, I want this here, I want the camera off to the side, or I just want a full screen picture. They're the one that kind of manages the whole event. Then what the option to be able to allow external presenters is really nice. As Joel mentioned, when we first did the first marathon last year, getting external presenters in was not simple. So Microsoft's made a lot of improvements to make that easier. And so now we can say, okay, just flip a switch. It's good to go. From there, nope, I gave a title. I know I'm missing some parts of the name there, but from there we have a few different options. Now, how you want your intended audience and how you want to work with this will determine which one you select and how you can select it. Part of it is we have an option for people in groups where it's okay, you specify who has access to it. So you can specify, I'm doing a live event just for our HR team, or we're doing it for our finance team, whatever you want. You can limit it down to specific people. Org-wide means anybody that's in your tenant can sign in, and then they can access it. Public would be kind of like what you're doing if you want to do a webinar. You want to do an event like this that's available to other people that are not don't have accounts in your tenant, for example. Really comes in handy. They come in as anonymous, but there are certain ways of producing the event that will disable that option. So if you're using it in Teams, so you're using Teams as your production platform, which will give you the UI to be able to say, hey, I want this here and this here, then public, totally an option. There are some other options if you're using an external app or device. So you can see as soon as I select this, public is now no longer an option. And part of that is when you're using an external app or device, usually called, and I think they mention it here, as an encoder. That's where you can use like OBS to fully produce it. You're using Microsoft Stream, which does not have a public access component to it. So that's why that kind of goes away. If we go back, we'll turn back on to Teams. We have a lot more options. And one of the things that's really kind of cool is the captioning. So in this meeting, I turned on the closed captioning. Kind of makes it nice. So if I speak too quickly or there's some sort of audio glitch, everybody can still see what I'm saying. When you're talking live events, there's also the ability that you can specify which language the person's talking in, but you can also say the captions will be automatically translated into you pick 6 different languages. So if you want to say, hey, if you're having a global event or an event that has a global company and you have people that speak different languages natively, you can select their different languages and allow them to carry on and be able to ingest that content in whatever way is comfortable to them. Also, there's the ability to turn on Q&A, which is a moderated Q&A. So that way attendees can ask a question. One of the producers can decide, hey, oh yeah, that's a good question, we want to share that, or they can answer it directly. So a lot of really cool options. And then when you're done, you can just hit schedule. And then from there, you have a link that you can share out with people to be able to attend your live event. And like as mentioned, as Joel had in the slides, live events are automatically recorded. You do not have an option to not record it. But you also do have the option of whether that recording is available to attendees or not. So as you can see, recording available to producers and presenters, I can't uncheck. Now, I'm sure there are policies where you can adjust that, but by default, it automatically records. The beauty of the recording available to attendees is after the event, if they click on that same link they had, they can come back in and they can watch the recording. They don't have to do anything special. It's just they're in and they're ready to roll. So a lot of really cool stuff you can do with live events that you don't necessarily get with a regular meeting. Back to you, Joel.
All right. Thanks, man. If anybody did go to that registration link and was wondering why they were getting any kind of error, it does wait for me to actually send the invite before people can actually register. So even though it looks like it's all ready and ready to go, it actually requires me first to send it. So that's actually a really key important thing as well, is don't forget. In fact, what's interesting is I went back to the calendar invite that I had created, and I still needed to put in the time and who the presenters were and click send. So I still needed to send it before. Once it's been sent, I'm actually going to show you my screen again because there's an important part to this I want you to see. Once it's been sent, you can then see it. So we created this one a little bit later on. I got to scroll a little bit further. There's my scroll bar. Okay, here's my sample webinar. If I edit this, you'll see this particular invite looks very different than a typical meeting because I actually have these little reports down here. So now I've got my registration report. You'll notice as well, it has this little, hey, visibility, attendees must register. There's my registration form. I can then go to my meeting options to allow presenters and control my meeting options is actually really important. Whether you're running a meeting, whether you're running a webinar, whether you're running a live event, these meeting options actually allows us to get into what is allowed in a meeting. So if we want to do a more structured thing, your lobby, do we want to have a lobby? What kind of structure do we actually want to have with this meeting? So as an example, who can bypass the lobby? I'm not a big fan of lobbies. So I actually like the idea of everyone bypassing the lobby. I don't want to have people coming in. I definitely don't want announcements. Who can present? I can decide that it's specific people that can present, and I can then as well, if I have a bunch of different people I've added to this, I can then pick and choose who those are. And here we've got those roles based. Do we want to have mic for attendees? No, we can keep that off by default, but we are, or we're using this for registration, but it's more like a class. We may want to, from the beginning, have mics for attendees. It really depends on your options and control. Cameras, same kind of deal. We can control who can and can't put on cameras. Recording automatically. There's some gotchas around this. If you've got attendees who keep bouncing back into the meeting, it will start up the recording again if that's turned on. So that's important for you to understand about the recording automatically is, oh, it's great for making sure it's being recorded. But anytime someone pops into the meeting, it kicks on the recording again and you end up with lots of little videos. The meeting chat as well and reactions, which is like the clapping and all that kind of fun stuff. Going back to this report, or our ability to kind of look at these registration and attendee reports, they're basically Excel files. So along the way, if you want to keep track of who registered, the challenge here is organizers see this. So you want to make sure that whoever the organizer is, if you keep asking the question, well, how many people registered? How many people registered? You want to be able to make sure that the person who actually creates the webinar is somebody that can actually answer that question of, well, how many people have registered? Because your registration reports can then give you that ability to look at those Excel files. And with that, let's pop back in. A couple of things I wanted to mention before we start to wrap this up and tell you our last little story about our Teams bombing experience and open it up for questions. But these registration reports, basically right in there, you'll see the attendance and registration. That meeting info, sometimes when you go in there, it'll actually be kind of zipped up. It'll kind of be closed up, but you can expand it and then get all the more additional details. You'll also notice across the top, there's a lot more information up here than your typical meeting, where you can see the whiteboard and the attendance and meeting notes and so on. So there's a lot more to manage there with that. I want to just throw a couple of use cases at you. Imagine you're in a class and there's a student who's spoofing another student and ejecting people from the meeting. What can you do? Well, I'll ask that rhetorically, or you can put it in the chat. But absolutely, if your students, if you actually are saying only the presenters can present, it doesn't matter whether someone's trying to do something as another student, because you can control what they can do. If they're actually using someone else's name and ejecting people, they shouldn't have the ability to eject if they're attendees. So you should be able to control that. A student muting the teacher, same thing. Students shouldn't be presenters. Even in a typical meeting, you can control who can mute others. And the default meeting type, yeah, people can all come in as presenters, but if you're having problems like this, you can easily set up that tiered structure where they're attendees and they can't control the mute of each other. So you don't have to have all those things on. If a guest is coming in on video and interrupting meetings and webinars, yeah, you can either boot that person or you can control video. Let's say a guest is filling the chat with inappropriate comments. Well, let's actually put that on hold and let's talk about our experience with the Zoom bombing. Story time. So, you want to kick this off, Galen?
Sure. Yeah. Thanks, Joel. In our scenario, as you've heard, we had many different sessions running at simultaneously, and in particular, these were Teams meetings, and the Teams meetings were configured such that we had both presenters and attendees. We did not have all of the capabilities that we have today in a tenant, but we were definitely trying to leverage roles within our Teams meetings to ensure that there was that certain people had different capabilities. One capability that we left enabled in our meetings was the ability to chat, right? Because we didn't allow people to come off of mute to ask questions, but we wanted to leverage chat in our sessions to facilitate attendee to speaker communication. So in our scenario, we had a session underway, and there was people were leveraging chat to communicate, and in particular, we had an attendee that began to insert chat messages that would, if viewed on a full screen, would show some type of picture, right? And in this case, the picture was not an image that was suitable for all audiences. I'll just state it like that. And so that was the extent, due to the configuration of our Teams meeting, that a bad actor could take in bombing our session. But it was really, what do we do at that point to negate that bad actor? And so we did things like removing that attendee from the meeting, but we could not turn off chat, right? We could not change the meeting options mid-meeting from that perspective, and continued to remove the bad actor from the meeting in order to limit the extent to which the chat could be bombed.
Yeah, one of the things that was interesting is apparently it looked like the person had scripted the whole thing, so that way when we kicked him out, they just came right back in with another account and just were carrying on. And so to add to that, the only option we really had to stop it from happening was we had to shut off chat. It's one of those things we wanted enabled for the event, but because of this bad actor, we had to turn it off. And so we shut it off for the rest of that session.
And some other sessions that were running concurrently, to make sure that pretty much every session that was running during that time frame, we disabled chat. As you can imagine, think about this particular conference. All of a sudden, the ability to chat is removed. We definitely had to make announcements as to why that was occurring. We definitely received many questions regarding why that was occurring. But it was something that we did to mitigate the impact of the bad actor in that case. John, you.
We definitely want to open this up for questions. What a wild event that was, and that moment. The good news is because we were kind of firm at the beginning during that largest session, or during that time, we were afraid somebody was going to just bounce from thing to thing to thing. But we ended up turning it back on in our next session, and we didn't have them come back. So I think they could tell that we were quite responsive and that it kind of ended their fun. And I think that's all it took to kind of send the message.
And one thing is, keep in mind that, as Joel indicated at the beginning, right? Zoom bombing is a federal offense. And, Microsoft, not Zoom, takes this seriously as well. So everybody's definitely interested if this occurs and in its occurrence and learning more about it. So this information obviously was shared by us as organizers with Microsoft, and so keep that in mind. I think that helps. I think bad actors are aware of that as well.
So I'm sending my LinkedIn and Twitter in the chat. Feel free to connect. I do want to I'm kind of an open connector. So if you guys are in industry and you want to connect on LinkedIn, totally cool. Yeah. Anyway, I'm very thankful to be able to connect with you guys here on this event. And if anybody has any questions, we can set up the ability for you to come off mute if you want to raise your hand. Otherwise, you can put your question in the chat. I realize we only have about 2-3 minutes till it's actually over. But thanks everybody for attending this session. We really appreciate all of you.
Jill, can you share the code in the deck?
Yes.
Yeah, it's also posted in the chat too. So
Yeah.
However you want to pull it up.
– 40408. I wanted to show you these meeting options. Even in the meeting, you can see here we actually do have the ability to control things like recording and transcriptions and chat bubbles and all these kind of fun things. We can go right into our meeting options right from here as well. And
Awesome.
have you guys ever used the emoticons? I don't know if those are turned on or off for this event. There we go. Yeah, I'm seeing some applause now. All right. Cool. All right. Thanks everybody for joining.
Sure. Thanks, Joel. Thanks, Ryan, and thanks Dylan for this wonderful session. It was very informative, and we got to learn about a lot about team speeches and all those things. So thanks for that. Thanks for sharing your knowledge, and we are happy to host you here.
Awesome. Thanks so much.
Thank you.